All right, welcome back to part 3 of Let's Build Multirotors. My name is Dillon Carpenter. I'm the digital experience lead for the Academy of Model Aeronautics. You might also know me as the executive producer of AMA Air. So I help Matt and Claire put out the show every 1st and 15th. So there's another episode coming up next Monday to give that plug right there. But what we're doing now is we are going to be finishing building this guy here. It's the ReadyMade RC Strix Screech multi-rotor frame. And you can see we're already pretty much on the way done. On the first part, we went through and we hooked up the motors to the ESC down here. We're using a 4-in-1 iFlight 4-in-1 there. And then the last show, if you guys remember, if you tuned in, we went ahead and hooked up the flight controller to the ESC, gave it some power, and hooked up the video system. So we did finally get good, clean video on that, which is nice. So our video system works. Flight controller is hooked up to the ESC. Today, what we're going to be doing is trying to get the receiver all hooked in and talking to the flight controller, which will talk to the rest of the drone. So, as I said on the last couple streams, this isn't meant to be, a master class. I'm not a perfect builder. This is just me building this multi-rotor out of some bits and bobs and spare parts that I had laying around, getting ready for the flying season. So some of these parts were furnished by ReadyMade RC. You can see I've got my nice big ReadyMade RC pit mat. Not a sponsor, but they did provide the frame, the antenna, the VTX, and I believe that is the extent of what they provided. And that was for a review that I did for the Park Pilot, worth a closer look, and it made it into Model Aviation magazine as well. So if you want to read that review that I did on this frame and some other parts that were furnished by ReadyMade RC, go to modelaviation.com, and you got that link right there at the bottom of your screen. It's got a flight video and shows you some of the flying characteristics of this frame here, which is a Truex design. So pros and cons of battery over, battery under. That is a good question. So I've noticed a lot of guys who race. We're just getting right into the questions, and that's great. If you guys have questions, I will definitely pause and answer them. This is meant to be an interactive screen, so thank you for the question. JSL151850B. I appreciate that for tuning in. So battery over, I feel like a lot of freestyle guys like to have the overslung battery, and a lot of racer guys like to have the underslung battery. And it just kind of affects the center of gravity, I think, is most of the thing. A lot of it will get filtered out by the flight controller for sure. But I think a big positive to have on the battery underneath is when you're flying along, if you're flying along like this and you hit something head on, like a gate, the battery doesn't take any of that force. So you don't blow up the battery just because you run into a gate. So I think that's a big reason why racers prefer the underslung battery. But as far as the overslung, I'm more of an overslung kind of guy. I like having the battery just right on top. That makes the quad sit nice and level when you're going to shoot off. Yeah, so good question. But barring any other questions, and he says, howdy, I really set up with the PC. I keep having connection flashing issues. Okay, yeah, we'll hopefully get into that on this stream. Once we hook this up, we'll go into Betaflight and kind of go tab by tab and start setting up the quad. I have a fresh flash of Betaflight. This is a Revolt flight controller that I'm using on this build, which is generally race flight, but just to make it, kind of remove the common denominators, I went ahead and flashed it with Betaflight. So we would have a little bit more flexibility there. So yeah, we'll definitely go into Betaflight and check out the setup for that. So very cool. That's what I'm hoping to get into after we get this soldered up. So I went ahead and took a look at my pinout for both the RSXR. This is a FreeSky RSXR receiver. I have a lot of good luck with these. I like these, and I like the R9 minis as well. I find that the R9 minis actually have a little bit better connection because they're meant for long range. So when you're flying, you know, in a park or something like that, they stay pegged at like 99% RSSI, which is really, really cool. But we're using an RSXR for this one, and I haven't had any problems with those. I just prefer the R9 minis. But first of all, go ahead and pull up my pinout for the RSXR. We have 4 wires here. One of them is a S port, which I don't need. So this yellow one is going to be S port. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out just before we begin here. And I'm going to grab my pliers, or not my pliers, my tweezers, and just get up under this. Get up under this little lip here. See if I can focus. Boom. Let's get up this little lip here and take this connector out. Some guys just cut these off because that's a lot quicker. But if you've seen my other streams, you know I don't like to waste anything, and I have drawers and drawers full of extra cable and stuff like that. Make sure I get that in the camera. So I just went ahead and pulled that out. So that's got the little guy still on there. Put that aside and kind of tamp that down a little bit. So if we look at the pinout for the race flight stack, it looks like it's a little bit confusing because I have this, that's flipped over, so that's actually the bottom of the stack. But if you look over towards the lower right quadrant, you'll see where it says S-Bus +5 and ground on the TX4 pads. Those would, if we flip it over and we look at my overhead shot, those would correspond to these pads here. So we'll go ahead and flip that back on just so I can double check. So at the top, the second pin looks like it's going to be, and that's actually TX1, I'm sorry. That's actually going to be S-Bus. So we'll go S-Bus, then power, then ground. And if we go back to the overhead shot, I appreciate you, Matt Ruddick, who is sitting in as producer, helping me. So I have plenty of hands to kind of switch back and forth on some of this stuff. AMA Airs, Matt Ruddick is kind of sitting in with me on this too. So really appreciate his help on this one. So this green wire is going to be our S-Bus wire. And we'll just go ahead and, these are already tinned because they've been used, so there's a little bit of solder on there, but we'll put a little bit of flux just right on the tip of there and start to solder. So we'll do S-Bus on that second pad right here. Just kind of give that a nice little tack. Just in and out real quick. And then we've got 5 volt in that middle, on the middle pad there. Give that a little tack. If I can get it to stay here. Like I said, guys, I'm not an expert solderer or something, so I'm sure I'm not doing this up to OSHA standards or anything like that. But these are some of the tips and techniques that I found that get me through a build. And I'm just kind of going through and doing a really quick build using those techniques that I found work for me. So that's already nice and tacked on there. What I like to do is kind of twist these up just to clean up the wires a little bit. So we'll twist them, give them kind of a braid. Twist those, twist those, twist those. And then we will take our receiver here. We'll go ahead and plug that in. Oops. Try not to take off these little antenna. These little mini UFL connectors are tricky. They like to come off. So where I think I'm going to put that is just right there. And what I'm going to do before I just do a quick little test fit right there, and that's going to fit super nice right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab some shrink wrap. We'll go ahead and shrink wrap this guy down. And that does a couple things. That protects some of the components because I'm going to be using Gorilla Tape. And Seth Eakin, I don't know if he's on this one this time, but last week stopped by and definitely gave us a good tip to remember not to tape directly to the components, which is a super good tip, because that Gorilla Tape that I like to use, this stuff right here, double-sided Gorilla Tape, this stuff will stick. I usually like to put a little zip tie around my components, but that's really just overkill in my experience. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this shrink wrap down just a little bit to about right here, just because it's a little bit long. And then you guys are going to get hit with some white noise here. As long as you better than O standards. Yep, that's true. That is true. What's going on, Kyle? Kyle's our education director here at the AMA. He's been putting out a lot of good content simultaneously with AMA Air and some of the stuff that the AMA is doing. He's been a great, had some good companion pieces going on. Definitely the guy to watch live on Facebook for educational stuff. So if you guys have, little projects or something you want to do, or even, little brothers, sisters, kids that are at home, you definitely want to check that out, because there's a lot of really good stuff. And you can find that at amaflightschool.org/quick-projects for a lot of those guys. Or catch Kyle live. He likes to go live in his shop with his boys. They're building a Bolsa USA kit. I'm not exactly sure. Kyle can chime in on what kind of kit that is. But they're building that, and it's usually funner watching Kyle try to wrangle the kids than it is watching them do any kind of building. So that's what I tune in for. But that's some good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this with my heat gun here to shrink wrap that down. So you guys are going to get hit with a little bit of white noise, just a heads up. All right, so that's going to help those antennas stay on, and that's going to protect some of the components from this Gorilla Tape that we're about to use. Let that cool down a little bit. Don't want to burn off my fingertips. So I've already got, so what I said earlier, I don't like to waste anything. I've got a little piece of Gorilla Tape here that I've used. I got some other stuff up and ready, and I cut off the whole strip, and I only needed about that much, so I just stuck it right there. So I'm going to use this that I've already kind of saved. Just stick it on the back of this guy here, and it's actually perfect for that. I must have used it on another RSXR, because that just fits perfect. Go ahead and plug that in so I know I can get the clearance with the connector. Pull off the back. Expose that tape, and then we'll just push her down right there where we fit her into. I'll make it a little offset so it doesn't interfere with that. There we go. And what I like about, one of the things that I wrote in my review of this frame is how many little cutouts they've got here. That's really nice to do exactly what I'm about to do, which is zip tie these components down into the frame. So there's a lot of good areas to do that. So I'll just put my zip tie in here, and we'll zip tie this guy down. I'm not going to go too tight on this, just enough to kind of keep it in place. I don't want to break the circuit board or anything like that, of course. But there we go. And then we'll get my little nippers out here and just nip that right in the bud. There we go. All right, so now it comes to what to do with these little guys here. Usually you hear that they've got to be at 45-degree angles, and usually the best way to do it is one pointing up. Let's see here. One pointing up and one pointing out like that at 45. I've seen, since we're not trying to get, you know, the most distance or anything out of these little receivers, I usually, when I tape down my motor wires, I usually leave my zip ties here. You can see I've zip tied down my motor wires, and I usually leave some slack there to kind of tack my my antenna wires down to, and that's a good, or a 90-degree angle. I think I said 45 earlier. That's a good 90-degree angle there to keep them up out of the way. It keeps them out of the propellers. But the thing about this frame is it comes with this 3D printed piece and these antenna tubes. And the way I have that set up, I might just be better off using those antenna tubes. I don't usually like having anything hanging off the back, but I think I'm going to do it this way, actually. I planned to go this way. I wanted to leave that there, but I went ahead and left them on just to share that tip with you guys, that if you don't have something like this, you can just leave a couple of these. And what I do is I route them down, each one down here, well, real nice. And then I put a little piece of shrink wrap over this antenna and its zip tie there. I'm going to go ahead and clip those though, because I'm not going to use them. Just a tip for you guys that I wanted to share about how I do that sometimes. But this is just so nice and perfect with their little antenna tubes here. I feel bad not using them. So I'll go ahead and run that down there. A little bit of the antenna sticking out. And I'll run this one down this channel. Easy peasy. All right, so there we go. Receiver's mounted, and this is a completed quad. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and fire up. I'm going to leave this off just in case I need to rewire anything. But first I'm going to double check. And I did this last time before I fired it up. But I'm just going to double check, because I don't know how many times this has happened. Every time you wire something new up, I'm going to take my multimeter here, and I have it set to resistance. And so if there is a short, if you short out these leads, it goes to 0 resistance. And what we're looking for when we hit the positive and negative terminal of the mains here, we don't want that to hit 0. And actually, usually it climbs a little bit because of the various capacitors and stuff in there, so it'll climb resistance. But if that goes to 0, you have a short somewhere in your build. And that's usually how you let out the magic smoke. And we talked last time, I've got, there's various forms of smoke stoppers. There's the light bulb, headlight one that kind of alerts you visually. And then there is a fuse version of that alerts you in a more, you know, cancel the power quick kind of way. And that's another form of smoke stopper, so you don't let out this magic smoke. But what I'm going to do now is grab my data cable I've got here, and let's go ahead and plug this up to Betaflight. So I've got my Betaflight. Here, we'll do this one. Got Betaflight here, all ready to go. And I kind of messed up because my mains are in the way of my USB, so I gotta finagle it a little bit, and that's gonna That's going to come back to haunt me probably when I'm trying to hook this up and tune it, but there we go. So we should have connection. Yep, you can see there in the upper right near the connection options, you've got connection to COM port 3. Now, there's a little bit of setup to Betaflight. A lot of stuff can be solved by downloading these drivers here. If you can see my mouse, you've got the various drivers and they've got links right here. So you definitely want to make sure to read the directions on those, set them all up, because one of the things for this build specifically was you had to put this board in DFU mode, which allows you to access the bootloader and write software to it. So JSL numbers, that might be something that you want to double check with if you're looking at connection flashing issues, is to definitely make sure your drivers are updated. Yes, drivers. And what I went through all of these that they had, and one thing that I had to do that was different was Impulse RC has a driver fixer tool, and none of those on that list worked for me here. So I had to download the Impulse RC driver fixer tool. You can just Google that if you need it. It should be one of the things to look up into, but I used that and it fixed my problem right away. So definitely make sure your drivers are all up to date. Perfect. Matt's got a link down there. Great catch on that one. And I think it's the second option. If you download the first option, it's some bit of software, but it's the second option. Want the driver fixer. So make sure that you go there. But we already have this set up, so I'm going to go ahead and connect into Betaflight. And since we're doing the receiver, the first thing I'm going to check is I'm going to go to the receiver tab here, and I'm going to turn on my radio. Welcome to OpenTX. And anyone familiar with Free Skies is going to know those really loud warnings right off the bat. Make sure this is on the right one. Now, I've already bound my receiver here, so I don't need to go through the bind process. I thought that might be the weeds for what we're doing, because you guys might be using Spectrum or Futaba. A lot of guys are switching over to the Jumper platform, which can do various different protocols like FlySky and stuff like that. So I won't go through into the weeds that far, but what we're going to look at is our receiver tab. And so you can see here there's nothing going on. So if my receiver was set up properly, you would see movement right here in these different things. So what we have to do is, I don't remember if this is in, there's a certain way to do this, and I'm going to do it wrong because I do it wrong every time. So we'll go into, I believe it's configuration. And forgive me, my software is running a little slow, so if it looks a little laggy for you, it's coming through on my computer, first of all. So what we're going to do is scroll down through here. We're going to look for receiver, and we want this to be S-Bus. So we're going to go into serial-based receiver, S-Bus right here. And we're going to look for our specific receiver, which in my case, we're using S-Bus. You can use S-Port or F-Port if you have the updated firmware, but I'm just going to use S-Bus because that's what I know and that's what I use. I'm sure there are probably reasons to go with S-Bus. The second thing you want to look at is ports. So we soldered that up to TX1, which usually confers with UART1. So I'm going to turn on serial receiver on UART1, and we are going to save, and that's going to reboot my board. So when that comes back up, you'll see COM3 pop up here. Well, that's specifically for my computer. It might be COM5 for you guys. It might be a different port. And I need to plug in my computer before my battery runs out. So give me just a second, guys. Hold on. Sorry about that. Okay, battery's plugged in. So we're going to reconnect. And if all goes well, if we go into receiver, nope. This is the fun part, guys. Make sure all this stuck. Okay, yeah, so I did it wrong. Ports first, make sure the serial RX is on, then configuration. Make sure we pick S-Bus, pick our receiver, S-Bus, we'll save and reboot. Wait for it to pop over. Now, fingers crossed. This is when we should see some activity on the receiver tab. Yep. And well, I am not seeing any activity here. So something's going on. And it might be the wrong UART. Because that should be, we should be seeing something going on here. Let me pull up my little overlay here and double check something. S-Bus TX1. Power. So this might be the receiver to go. So let me plug in a battery here. I'm going to use my smoke stopper just because we're on the bed. I don't want anything happening. So we'll plug this guy in and see if that gives power to our receiver. Negative, Ghost Rider. S-Bus, S-Bus. Now I had thought that this was already bound, the receiver. And I went ahead and covered it up with heat shrink, so I'm not sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to double check that. I'm going to take it all apart. What are we doing? How are we doing? Hey, Paul. So we're going to go back in here and just make sure that my my receiver is in fact bound. See, I assumed, and we know what assuming does, right? So I'm going to cut this all out. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Like I said, I am not an expert, as you can certainly tell. But this is just what happens on the bench. Sometimes you get it all hooked up and it works perfectly the first time. Sometimes you gotta try a few things. So I'm just cutting this heat shrink that I put on so nicely. That's why I don't like to waste, because sometimes you just need that little bit extra because you messed up and had to remove it. So I don't know how many of you are AMA members, but if you aren't, you should be. But what I just found out is you can actually make your pilot name your AMA number. So before there was a number there, it was like 15 something something something, but you can get a vanity AMA number and make it your pilot name, which is really cool. So that's something that just came in. If you didn't know, now you know. I think you just get less bad. Yep, that's pretty much it. Every magic smoke is a learning experience. All right. So we're going to turn this back on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
You're so loud. We're going to see, yep, so we've got the bind. So it is bound. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but we've got a little green light here. So that tells us we're bound. So if I turn off my receiver here, or my transmitter, I'm going to turn that off. That should turn red. So that means we are not bound. There is no signal going to it. Turn my radio back on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
It's going to go green. So, troubleshooting is what, and that's the name of the game right here. We're trying to figure out why Betaflight doesn't see my receiver. I have a feeling it has to do with the serial port. Usually the UARTs follow the numbers of the TX and whatnot. Unless I'm forgetting something. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. We've got S-Bus here. Looking through my Betaflight here. We've got S-Bus turned on. I don't know. Anybody have any ideas? Because I'm stumped. Remember the exact kit. HK quad to build. Can't remember the exact kit. Just haven't built it yet. Well, follow the stuff that works for me. Don't follow anything that don't. Bridge the invert tabs is what my producer's telling me. Let me double check on the back here because I know there's some weird stuff you have to do for race flight. And Matt is a race flight guy, or was. I don't know if he still does race flight. So let's look on the back here. I'm going to unplug that for now. We can go back to my wide shot here, or my overhead shot. So these guys, there's certain things you have to do with these bridges, these little bridges here. And we got to make sure these are correct. So I'm going to give a shot right here so we can see that. And it looks like TX1 invert bridge. Oh, right here, TX1 invert bridge. So that's good to go. And we've got it on 5 volts. TX4 is not inverted. So if I were to use that one, it's not inverted. But TX1, which I am plugged into S-Bus. Do we want S-Bus out or S-Bus in? That's another question here. So let me pull up my schematic here. S-Bus in. No, because that would be for like a slave, if you had like redundancy or something. I'm pretty sure anyway. Well, because it's getting signal. Flip back over to Betaflight here. I just don't know. S-Bus. And we're definitely inverted. Oh, you know what? I think I know what I need to do. So when I looked this up, there was something you had to do in the CLI, now that I'm thinking about it. So I'm going to look into that. You guys get to watch me Google on a live stream, which is real fun. What's everyone working on? Let's get some comments coming in here. It's okay. Nothing goes right live. You are true. So looks like JSL's working on a QAV 250. Paul's working on something from HK Hobby King, probably. Anybody else doing any kind of projects? Anybody else building something like this? I know there's some kind of CLI command that I have to do. I just got to figure out what it is. Nobody else working on anything? Doesn't have to be multirotor related. Yeah, we're losing people. That's all right. We'll make this a video at the end, and we'll cut all to it. I'm planning on putting all these together. Well, what I can do is look into that actually off stream. We're just going to assume that this works for right now. I'm going to put this aside. We can set up the rest of the, well, no, not allowed until the house is ready for market. Oh yeah, you gotta put priorities first. So what I'm going to go through is just do the rest of the setup here for Betaflight. I can figure out what's going on with the receiver at a later time. So we'll jump back into Betaflight here and connect. Looks like I unintentionally put it into DFU mode, which is not what I wanted. Well, what the heck? Why is this in DFU? Well, that's strange. Make sure my boot pins aren't being jumped. There we go. Must have had something, a blob of solder or something on the boot pins. All right. So what we're going to do is just go through the rest of this setup here real quick. Using what I usually use. So D-Shot, actually, yeah, D-Shot 600 is usually what I go on here. Set that up and then see if this will work at 8K, 8K. I'm going to turn off all this stuff here. Accelerometer, barometer, magnometer. I don't want the accelerometer on because I'm not going to use any stable flight modes. I don't even think this one has a barometer or a magnometer, whatever you call it. So I'm not going to use those. We're going to save and reboot there. Dynamic filtering is on, air mode is on, anti-gravity is on, and those are all some late Betaflight updates that have really stabilized the platform, literally and figuratively. So we'll save that tab. PID tuning we'll save for another day for sure. Modes, my arm mode is usually on auxiliary 1, so we can double check that once we have the receiver figured out. And then I always like to put pre-arm on as well. I want to add range. Pre-arm on, and I believe that's auxiliary 4. We can double check that. So pre-arm, basically, if you're not familiar with it, is just kind of a safety mechanism. So if you've ever gone out to the field and you bring your radio with you and you lean down and you accidentally hit your arm switch, that's bad. You don't want that to happen. So pre-arm basically takes this momentary switch here, and this is my arm switch usually. So when you pre-arm, momentary and arms the quad. That way, if this isn't enabled, you don't arm. So if you're walking out there and you've got your hand here and you accidentally slip and you hit the arm button, your quad isn't going to fly up into your face. So I always do pre-arm, arm for me. And then my flight modes, if I have any, are usually right here. Or even Betaflight has a neat little thing where you can set up different rate for profiles. So if I want to do some smooth flying, I'll have my low rates up here. If I want to do a little bit more flippy stuff, I'll have some faster rates right here. And then if I just want like crazy, insane roll response or something to do like snap rolls and snap flips, I'll put it all the way down. Otherwise, you can also do your turtle mode on another switch. I usually have that on this switch. And this is the Taranis QX7S, actually, which I did another review on. So you can check that out. I don't have the link ready, but that's a good radio. It's been my main radio for sure. Let's see, what else are we working on? Building a new desk for my office, says Ashley Rowan, our social media extraordinaire. JSL hasn't flown for 2 years. Got stuff in the way. Yep. Got stuff on the way, probably. Dollar Store USB cable was unsuitable for setup. Yeah, you got to make sure that it's a data cable. So a lot of times USB cables are just power only, so they don't have that extra wire that transmits the data. So you definitely have to have a data wire. So we're in here back in Betaflight, now that I've kind of shown you that, and setting everything up. So pre-arm again, my flip over after crash is usually on auxiliary 2, and I have that all the way down. Otherwise, some of this other stuff you can use. Beeper is nice if you've got like a buzzer on your quad, so you can set up a switch to turn on the buzzer if you're looking for it, if it's lost in the grass. You can ask Kyle or Ashley or Matt or anybody that we've used that for me. That would have been very helpful for me several times that I've lost my quads. And right now what I'm going to do is go ahead and check the motors out. We don't need the receiver for that. So I just want to make sure my motors are all spinning the correct way and are on the correct pads, because I had to flip. If you remember my first video, I had to flip the ESC around a little bit so that the mains were sticking out this side. So we want to make sure that this is motor 1, 2, 3, 4, and I always go props out so that they spin against each other away from the camera. So that's what I'm going to set up for here. So what you're going to do is go ahead and apply power to your quad. You get all the startup tones, and then props off on the bench. This is that switch that says I do not have my props on, because this is going to make these motors spin. So never, ever, 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 ever have your props on when you're on the bench. Always take them off. It takes 5 minutes and you save all your fingers. Never, never, never have your props on the bench. That's like rule number 1. So we're going to turn that on, saying that we don't have props on. And then what I do is just do a spin up of all of them, just to make sure they're all spinning. And it does look like it. And I'm going to take it real low. So I apologize if you guys just hear motor noise. but I'm going to turn the motors down real low, and I'm just going to take my finger, or you can take like a zip tie or something to test the direction. Let me make sure that I'm in frame here because I'm looking at Betaflight, so you guys can see. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is take this piece of zip tie I've left over and just kind of check the motors. So this motor is definitely spinning this way, which is what we want it to do. This motor is spinning the wrong way. It's spinning this way, which is not correct. This motor is spinning the right way. So you can see here, I'll try to zoom in so you guys can see that here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but you can see the zip tie showing the rotation going this way. And then the last one is going the wrong way. So I'm going to cut those off. So it looks like these two motors here are the ones that we're going to want to reverse, which we will do in BL Heli Suite. So that's another program you got to download to program the ESC. Or you could swap motor wires, but I don't like doing that. First of all, we hid the motor wires, so it's not an easy swap for us. So we're just going to do it in software. But to move on, I'm going to just make sure that we're going with motors 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see right here, that's what your motor setup is for Betaflight. You can do custom motor orders and stuff like that, but I don't know why you'd want to do that. So what we're going to do is just spin up one by one. Okay, so that is the wrong motor. 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 All right, so that is another thing that we have to do in Betaflight. So again, this should be 1, 2, 3, 4, and it looks like we went 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're kind of flipped around. So let me double check that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what we're going to have to do is get into our CLI, which is going to reboot our board. And there's going to be a series of should make foam rubber props for bench testing. Wouldn't fly, of course. Man, that still sounds like you're going to break a finger with those. All right. So here in your motor in your CLI, you're going to put in, if you have to do something like this. Usually they set up right, but I had to get fancy with this board and flip it around and turn it. So I'm going to type in motor list. Nope. I could change these. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, motor. Okay, motor get. Oh, get motor. Sorry, I was parsing out. Get motor. There we go. So this is going to show you motors reversed. That's not what I want. Oh shoot. Back in the day, I learned this from Bardwell. It should be motor list. Well, that's another roadblock that I've run into for you guys. Definitely should have checked that out first, I guess. All right, well, let's go into, let's just get BL Heli set up here. So we've got the BL Heli app. I'm going to pull that up here instead of Betaflight. Nope. Let's try this one. There we go. So we've got BL Heli. Make sure that we're disconnected from Betaflight because you can't use more than one COM port at a time. Connect here, and we're going to read setup. Now you have to be plugged in to read your setup. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is while we're in here, let's flash all to the newest version of BL Heli. So that just updates the firmware of the ESC to make sure that you are on the most current one. Sorry guys for jumping around here. Resource list, that's what it is. I can go back after we do this. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your help here. That's why I need somebody else to help me out. It's been a while since I've done this, if you can't tell. Resource list. It's all coming back to me. So we'll update these, and then, well, that might not be right once we get our motors all flipped around. So yeah, I think we'll go back to Betaflight and put the motors in the right position, and then we'll do this. So let's go back to Betaflight. We'll connect. Resource list, Matt reminded me, is what I know. Resource, is it get resource? Huh. There we go, just resource. All right. So we got to make note of where these motors are. So we've got motor 1 on B00, motor 2 on B01, motor 3 on A03, motor 4 on A02. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to write this down. With what we currently have. Oops, just hit my rig there. I'll write this down with what we currently have and what we need. So going back into Betaflight, motor 1, B00, motor 2 is B01, motor 3 is A03. So these numbers are just telling the chip, you know, which one of these wires to fire the motor signals on. And we want to make sure that these are on the correct channels, because if you have them all wonky, then, you know, the software is going to tell the flight controller to tell the speed controller to speed up motor 1. But if motor 1's over here on another motor place, it's going to get all screwed up. And it's not going to know which way is up, literally. So we've got motor 1 here currently motor 1 and motor 2. So basically we need to flip motor 1 and motor 2. And the way we do that is resource motor 1, and I want none. So we're going to clear motor 1 and motor 2. Resource motor 2, none. All right. So now these are clear. So what we're going to go do is rewrite where the motor is. So we'll go resource motor 1, and we want to tell it to use what used to be motor 2. So we want resource motor 1 B0 B0 1. Okay, and then we want resource motor 2 to be what motor 1 used to be. So that'll be B00. There we go. And then we'll save, and we'll double check that. So now when we get it all back up, these two motors should now be hopefully in the correct spot. So let's go back to our motor tab. I understand I do not have my props on. Spin up motor 1 should be this one. Yes. Spin up motor 2 should be this one. Yes. And are those, they're actually going in the right direction now too. Nope, this one needs reverse still. This one still needs reversed. Okay. Good. Now we'll go back and we'll just flip around 3 and 4. So resource 3 and 4 is A03 and A02 respectively. So we'll go resource motor 3, none. Resource motor 4, none. And then resource motor 3, which will be A02. Oops. Make sure you got a space in there. And then resource motor 4, A03. And save. And you can see up there, motor 1 is B01, motor 2 is B00. Those used to be flipped. So you can tell that they definitely has flipped. So we'll save that. It's going to reboot. We'll connect back in there, go back to the motors tab. And now this should be motor 3. Yep. And this should be motor 4. Yep. Motor 4 is going the right way. Motor 3 is going the wrong way. So now, is there any questions? I'm going kind of fast. We doing good? All right. So now what I'll do is I'll just get these motors set up correctly. And next time when we come back, hopefully I'll have figured out the troubleshooting with the receiver, and we'll be able to talk about that. But for now, we've definitely gotten our motors on the right spot. And I'm going to go back into BL Heli and get them rotating the correct direction. So let's go BL Heli configurator. Going to BL Heli connect, read setup. And so now, well, let's make sure, because I don't think these were affected. I'm going to have to double check here, because I think if I switch, well, let's just do this. So we'll do ESC2 is reversed, and then 1, 2, 3, ESC3 is reversed. So that should change the direction, hopefully to the correct direction. And we'll write that setup. It'll beep, letting us know that it's going to disconnect here. And then we'll go back into Betaflight and we'll test our motors. So now motor 2, okay, is spinning the correct direction. So it's spinning this way. And motor 3 is also spinning the correct direction. So there you have it. We've got our motors set up. we didn't get finished with the receiver today, which is unfortunate, but we do have all of our motors set up correctly in Betaflight and updated ESC in BL Heli. So I just want to say that I really appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out with me for a little bit. I hope you learned something. Sorry that went a little bit funky with the receiver, but you know, things happen. We definitely did get a good ways through with these motor remaps though. And you know, if you're not an AMA member, definitely go check us out. You can go to modelaircraft.org /join to look at everything we have available for you. And definitely, if you're on Facebook right now, so modelaircraft.org /join to join us up and to check us out. If you're on YouTube watching, thank you, I appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content like this, because we're definitely going to keep doing this. We're going to go through this whole thing. We're going to program, go outside for some test flights, and maybe even a flight video as well. Try to figure out how to do that live. So go ahead and hit subscribe if you're on Facebook. Give us a like, or on YouTube, give us a like if you like this content. Go over to iFlyAMA Facebook page if you want to see definitely more content like this from AMA members. That's facebook.com/groups/iFlyAMA to join up there. It's a really cool group. There's a lot of cool people on there doing a lot of cool things. It's really cool, if I didn't say that enough. But again, thank you. Like, comment, share, subscribe. If you like this content, I really appreciate it. But until next time, we'll see you. Thanks again.